Cook hits lottery jackpot, tricks husband to keep prize, but uncovers a surprising truth. In the heart of downtown Detroit, nestled between a rundown laundromat and a small grocery store, sits a modest restaurant that serves comfort food to the locals. The paint on the sign is peeling, and the chairs have seen better days, but the place is always filled with patrons looking for a decent meal at a fair price. Behind the counter, surrounded by the clatter of pots and pans, is Patricia, a 38-year-old cook known more for her sharp tongue than her culinary prowess. Patricia works tirelessly, flipping burgers and ladling out bowls of soup, her apron stained with the day's specials. Her cooking is not remarkable, but it satisfies the regulars who come in for a meal and a brief respite from their own daily struggles. She moves with efficiency rather than grace, her mind often elsewhere as she considers the routine of her life, which has long since lost its excitement. At home, Patricia's life mirrors the simplicity of her workplace. She lives with her husband, Michael, in a small, unremarkable house in the suburbs of Detroit. Michael is a 42-year-old high school math teacher, content with his steady job and modest lifestyle. Their evenings together are marked by silence and the hum of the television, a far cry from the dreams they once shared. "Michael, don't you ever wish for more?" Patricia asks one evening, breaking the silence as they sit on their worn-out couch, watching reruns of old sitcoms. Her voice carries a hint of irritation, a familiar tone in their household. Michael glances at her over his glasses, his expression calm but tired. "I'm happy with what we have, Pat. Stability is important," he replies, his focus shifting back to the screen. Patricia sighs, her frustration growing as she looks around their small living room. The walls, lined with faded photographs, seem to close in on her, a constant reminder of the dreams she feels are slipping away. Her life feels like a series of missed opportunities, and her dissatisfaction with Michael's contentment only deepens her longing for something more. Despite the monotony, Patricia harbors an unwavering belief that luck could turn her way at any moment. She dreams of escaping this life of mediocrity, of finding a way to make her mark and secure a future filled with the luxuries she yearns for. But for now, she remains stuck in the rhythm of her everyday existence, waiting for a chance to break free. As the restaurant's bell rings, signaling the arrival of another customer, Patricia puts on a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes, ready to serve another meal, hoping that tomorrow might bring something different. It was a typical Thursday afternoon at the restaurant, the kind where the lunch rush had left behind a sea of empty plates and a kitchen coated in the scent of fried food and simmering soup. Patricia stood at her usual station, wiping her brow with the back of her hand and glancing at the clock, counting down the hours until she could escape the confines of the kitchen. During a brief lull, she leaned against the counter, joining her colleagues in their usual banter. Joe, the dishwasher, was recounting the latest gossip he'd overheard from the customers, his stories punctuated by the clang of dishes being stacked. "Did you hear about the Johnsons? Won the lottery last week," Joe said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Can you imagine? One day you're scraping by, and the next you're a millionaire." Patricia perked up at this, her mind immediately racing with possibilities. She had always believed that life was a game of chance, and the thought of a lottery win was a tantalizing fantasy that often occupied her mind. "If I ever had that kind of luck, I wouldn't think twice about leaving this place behind," Patricia said with a wry smile, her eyes scanning the dimly lit restaurant. "I'd do whatever it takes to secure my fortune and live the life I've always wanted." Her words hung in the air, a bold declaration that caught the attention of her colleagues. Some laughed it off as a joke, while others nodded in agreement, sharing the same dreams of escaping their mundane routines. "You and me both, Pat," said Lisa, the waitress, as she leaned on the counter, tired from the day's work. "But what would you do with all that money, really?" Patricia's mind raced with images of luxury, lavish vacations, a sprawling house far away from the noise and grime of the city, clothes that spoke of elegance and status. She imagined never having to cook another meal unless she wanted to, spending her days basking in the freedom that only wealth could provide. "I'd live a life of comfort and luxury," Patricia replied, her voice tinged with ambition. "No more penny pinching, no more late nights here. Just everything I've ever dreamed of." Her colleagues listened, some with envy, others with skepticism, as they returned to their tasks. But for Patricia, this conversation was more than idle talk. It was a glimpse into the life she was determined to claim if ever given the chance. Her heart beat a little faster at the thought, her mind crafting plans and scenarios where she was no longer bound by the limitations of her current existence. As the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the restaurant floor, Patricia felt a sense of resolve building within her. She was convinced that, given the opportunity, she would seize it without hesitation, leaving behind the mediocrity that had defined her life for far too long. Patricia sat at the small kitchen table, a stack of bills in front of her and a steaming cup of coffee in hand. The house was quiet, Michael having left early for school. Her thoughts drifted back to the conversation at the restaurant about the Johnsons' lottery win, sparking a familiar flicker of hope. As part of their weekly routine, Patricia and Michael bought a lottery ticket together. It was more of a ritual than a serious attempt at fortune. They would choose numbers over dinner, mostly for fun, knowing the odds were not in their favor. But Patricia had always held on to a secret hope that one day, things might change. That afternoon, as she glanced at the ticket lying on the table, she felt an unusual sense of anticipation. The lottery draw had been the night before, and she hadn't checked the numbers yet. On a whim, Patricia picked up the ticket and her phone, navigating to the lottery website with a few quick taps. Her eyes scanned the winning numbers, her heart skipping a beat as they began to match the sequence on her ticket. One by one, each number fell into place. She blinked, disbelief washing over her as the reality of what she was seeing sank in. The numbers she and Michael had chosen together had hit the jackpot. "Oh my God," Patricia whispered, her voice barely audible as she sat back in her chair, the ticket clutched tightly in her hand. Her mind raced with possibilities, the sudden shift from dream to reality leaving her breathless. For a moment, she considered calling Michael, sharing the news that would change their lives forever. But as she imagined his reaction, his practical plans for the money, the sensible decisions she knew he would make, a new thought took root. What if she kept the winnings for herself? The idea was intoxicating, the prospect of finally living the life she had always wanted without compromise. She could leave her job, travel the world, and indulge in every luxury she had ever dreamed of. The money could be her ticket to freedom, unencumbered by Michael's modest ambitions. As the minutes ticked by, Patricia's decision solidified. She wouldn't share the news, not yet, at least. Instead, she would figure out a way to claim the prize without him knowing. Her mind whirred with plans, the thrill of secrecy adding to her excitement. In that moment, Patricia crossed a line, her ambition and desire for a different life outweighing any sense of loyalty or fairness. She tucked the ticket into her pocket, a small but significant step toward a future she intended to shape entirely on her own. The lottery ticket, once a symbol of shared hope, now represented a secret and a promise to herself. A promise that she was willing to do whatever it took to break free from the constraints of her current life, even if it meant betraying the trust of the man she had once loved. For the next few days, Patricia carried the winning lottery ticket everywhere, keeping it close as if it were a talisman. It felt both thrilling and terrifying to have her future tucked away in her pocket, a secret that pulsed with potential. Yet, beneath the excitement, a persistent unease gnawed at her, a tug-of-war between her conscience and ambition. Every time she glanced at Michael, guilt prickled her skin. He remained blissfully unaware of her internal struggle, his routine unchanged as he prepared lessons and graded papers at the kitchen table. Michael had always been a pillar of support, his calm demeanor a steady counterbalance to Patricia's fiery nature. One evening, as they sat across from each other over a dinner of leftovers, Michael looked up with a curious smile. "You seem distracted lately, Pat. Everything okay?" he asked, his eyes warm and genuine. Patricia hesitated, the words catching in her throat. For a moment, she considered telling him everything. The lottery win, the plans swirling in her mind. But as quickly as the thought surfaced, it was replaced by a surge of self-preservation. If she shared the news, the money would be split, the freedom she craved diluted by practicality and shared dreams. "I'm fine, just busy at the restaurant," she replied, forcing a smile and pushing her food around her plate. Michael nodded, satisfied with her answer, and turned his attention back to his meal. Yet, Patricia's heart thudded in her chest, the weight of her deception settling like a stone. That night, as she lay in bed, her mind raced with possibilities and plans. What if Michael found out before she could act? What if she lost everything she was working toward? Her dreams were filled with images of luxury and independence, but the reality was far more complex. To keep the winnings for herself, she needed a plan, one that would allow her to claim the money without Michael's knowledge. Her thoughts turned to the practicalities of such a scheme: securing a separate bank account, crafting a believable story, and, ultimately, breaking free from her current life. The more she pondered, the more her resolve hardened. Patricia envisioned a future where she was in control, where her desires weren't compromised by another's expectations. It was a seductive vision, one that promised liberation and adventure. But the path to that future required careful maneuvering and an unwavering commitment to her decision. In the quiet darkness of their bedroom, with Michael's steady breathing beside her, Patricia resolved to move forward with her plan. She would take the necessary steps to secure the money, even if it meant unraveling the life they had built together. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying, a test of her ambition and determination. With her mind made up, Patricia felt a sense of clarity. The debate within her had reached its conclusion, and she was ready to embrace the challenges ahead. The promise of a new life awaited, and she was determined to seize it, no matter the cost. The morning air was crisp as Patricia stepped out of the house, the chill matching the steely determination in her heart. It was time to set her plan into motion, a plan that required careful execution and a trusted ally. Her thoughts turned to Sandra, a lawyer known for her discretion and ability to navigate complex situations. Patricia had heard stories of Sandra's prowess in handling sensitive cases, and she felt a flicker of hope that this was the woman who could help her secure her future. At the law office, Sandra greeted Patricia with a knowing smile, her sharp eyes assessing her new client. "So, what brings you here today?" Sandra asked, gesturing for Patricia to take a seat. Patricia hesitated for a moment, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. "I want a divorce," she said finally, her voice steady despite the turmoil churning inside her. Sandra nodded, unfazed by the declaration. "And you want to ensure that it's in your favor?" she inquired, her tone businesslike but not unkind. Patricia nodded, the enormity of her request settling over her. "Yes, I want to keep everything," she admitted, her eyes locking onto Sandra's. Sandra leaned back in her chair, considering Patricia's words. "That's a tall order, but not impossible," she replied, her mind already working through the possibilities. "We'll need to proceed carefully. It's important that Michael believes this is simply due to irreconcilable differences." Patricia nodded, relief mingling with anxiety. The path ahead was fraught with deception, but she was willing to take the risk. Sandra's confidence was reassuring, and for the first time, Patricia felt a glimmer of optimism that her dream was within reach. Over the next few weeks, Patricia and Sandra worked together, crafting a strategy that would allow Patricia to quietly disentangle herself from her marriage. Patricia began the process of separating their finances, carefully siphoning funds into a new account. Each step felt like a small victory, her vision of freedom growing clearer with every move. At home, Patricia maintained the facade of normalcy, engaging in polite conversation with Michael while silently orchestrating her escape. It was a delicate dance, one that required precision and patience. But Patricia was resolute, her eyes fixed on the prize that awaited her at the end of this journey. One evening, as they sat in their familiar silence, Patricia broached the subject of divorce, her voice measured and calm. "Michael, I've been thinking, maybe it's time for us to go our separate ways," she said, watching his reaction closely. Michael looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Where's this coming from, Pat?" he asked, his voice laced with confusion. Patricia forced a sad smile, the words coming more easily than she expected. "We've grown apart, and I think it's best if we both move on," she replied, maintaining her composure. Michael nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of her words. "If that's what you truly want," he said finally, his voice tinged with resignation. As Michael agreed to the divorce, Patricia felt a surge of triumph. The hardest part was over, and she was one step closer to the life she had always dreamed of. The path was set, and there was no turning back. With Sandra's help, Patricia was confident she could navigate the challenges ahead, ensuring that her future was as bright and unencumbered as she imagined. Patricia found herself spending more time at Sandra's office, discussing the intricacies of her case and fine-tuning their approach. The sterile, modern decor of the office contrasted sharply with the intensity of their conversations. But it was in this setting that Patricia discovered an unexpected camaraderie with her lawyer. Sandra, in her late 30s and with a reputation for fearlessness, shared stories of her own career journey. "You know, Patricia, I wasn't always the slick attorney you see today," Sandra confided one afternoon, leaning back in her chair with a sly grin. "I started out in a small firm where ambition was considered a vice rather than a virtue." Patricia listened intently, finding solace in Sandra's tales of overcoming obstacles and defying expectations. There was something invigorating about hearing another woman's stories of ambition and success, a reminder that Patricia wasn't alone in her quest for a better life. "I admire your drive," Sandra continued, studying Patricia with a mixture of respect and curiosity. "Most people wouldn't have the guts to do what you're doing." Patricia nodded, feeling a sense of validation in Sandra's words. "I just want a chance to live my life on my terms," she replied, her voice filled with determination. Together, they plotted their course with meticulous precision. Sandra's experience proved invaluable as she navigated the legal complexities of Patricia's case, ensuring that the divorce proceedings were conducted smoothly and discreetly. As they worked together, a bond formed between the two women, a shared understanding of the lengths they were willing to go to achieve their goals. During one of their meetings, Sandra shared a story that struck a chord with Patricia. "I once had a client who was in a similar situation," Sandra recounted, her tone thoughtful. "She wanted out of her marriage and a chance to start anew. We managed to secure her future without her husband realizing until it was too late." Patricia absorbed the story, the parallels to her own situation reinforcing her resolve. It was a reminder of what was at stake and the importance of staying focused on the endgame. Sandra's confidence was infectious, bolstering Patricia's belief that she was making the right choices. As the days turned into weeks, Patricia felt a growing sense of empowerment. Her life, once defined by mediocrity and frustration, was beginning to transform. The alliance with Sandra had given her not only the means to secure her fortune, but also a newfound confidence in her ability to shape her destiny. Meanwhile, Michael remained oblivious to the machinations unfolding around him. He continued his daily routine, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface of their marriage. Patricia's interactions with him were cordial but distant, each conversation a reminder of the life she was leaving behind. Patricia's transformation was not without its challenges, but with Sandra's guidance, she felt equipped to handle whatever obstacles lay ahead. The future she envisioned was tantalizingly close, a life of independence and fulfillment waiting just beyond the horizon. And with Sandra by her side, Patricia was more determined than ever to claim it as her own. With the divorce proceedings quietly underway and her plans carefully laid out, Patricia began to taste the freedom she had longed for. It was a strange yet exhilarating experience, living a life that was split between the mundane routine of her current reality and the thrilling prospect of a new beginning. She started by indulging in small luxuries that had once seemed out of reach. Patricia would spend her afternoons wandering through high-end boutiques, letting her fingers glide over designer fabrics she had only admired from afar. On occasion, she allowed herself to purchase a dress or a pair of shoes, savoring the thrill of having something beautiful that belonged solely to her. Her excitement grew as she secretly planned extravagant vacations, browsing travel websites and imagining herself lounging on pristine beaches or exploring vibrant cities. She could almost feel the sun on her skin and hear the distant hum of foreign languages, a world away from her current existence. Every purchase, every plan, felt like a small rebellion against the life she had known. The secrecy added a layer of excitement to each indulgence, her double life becoming a game she played with herself. Patricia moved with a newfound confidence, each step a reminder that she was in control of her destiny. Meanwhile, at the restaurant, Patricia maintained her facade of normalcy, slipping effortlessly into her role as head cook. Her colleagues noticed her lighter mood but attributed it to the changes in her personal life, unaware of the true extent of her plans. Lisa, the waitress, cornered her one afternoon during a break, curiosity etched on her face. "You seem different lately, Pat. Happier, even," she remarked, sipping her coffee. Patricia shrugged, a secret smile playing on her lips. "Just making some changes," she replied cryptically, enjoying the mystery she was weaving around herself. Michael, however, was less easily convinced. He noticed the changes in Patricia, the subtle shift in her demeanor, the unexplained absences, the glint of excitement in her eyes. Confusion and concern mingled as he tried to make sense of the divorce and the transformation of the woman he had known for so long. "Patricia, is there someone else?" Michael asked one evening, his voice laced with a vulnerability that tugged at Patricia's conscience. She met his gaze, her resolve unwavering despite the flicker of guilt. "No, Michael, there isn't. It's just time for me to figure out what I want," she replied, choosing her words carefully to maintain the illusion she had crafted. As Michael nodded, accepting her answer with reluctant resignation, Patricia felt a pang of sadness for what they had once shared. But the allure of her new life was too strong, the promise of independence and fulfillment far outweighing the ties that still bound her to her old world. With each passing day, Patricia became more adept at navigating her dual existence. She was playing the game with skill and precision, the stakes higher than ever as she moved closer to securing her future. The life she dreamed of was within reach, and she was determined to claim it, no matter the cost. The final pieces of Patricia's plan were falling into place. After weeks of careful maneuvering, she stood at a pivotal moment, poised to step into the new life she had meticulously crafted. The divorce papers were ready, and all that was left was for Michael to sign them. It was the last hurdle, and Patricia felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety as she prepared to present them to him. That evening, she returned home with the documents tucked discreetly in her bag, her heart pounding with anticipation. Michael was in the living room, his attention divided between a stack of papers he was grading and the muted sounds of the television. The familiar setting felt strangely foreign, a backdrop to the seismic shift about to occur in both their lives. "Michael," Patricia began, her voice steady but her hands slightly trembling as she approached him, "I think it's time we finalize things." Michael looked up, confusion and sadness clouding his eyes. "You really want this, don't you?" he asked, his voice tinged with resignation. Patricia nodded, trying to mask the guilt that tugged at her conscience. "I do. It's for the best," she replied, handing him the divorce papers. Michael took the papers, his eyes scanning the text as he absorbed the reality of what was happening. Patricia watched him, her heart heavy but resolute. This was the moment she had been working toward, the culmination of her efforts to seize control of her destiny. As Michael signed the documents, Patricia felt a surge of triumph mingled with relief. It was a false high, a momentary victory that masked the complexities and challenges yet to come. But for now, it was enough. The act of signing the papers signified a turning point, a confirmation that she was finally free to pursue the life she had always envisioned. "You know, Pat, I hope you find what you're looking for," Michael said quietly, handing the signed documents back to her. There was no anger in his voice, only a deep sadness that made Patricia's heart ache. "Thank you, Michael. I hope you do too," Patricia replied, her voice softer than she intended. With the divorce now official, Patricia felt the weight of her decision lift, replaced by a sense of exhilaration at the possibilities before her. The path to her dreams was clear, the obstacles that once seemed insurmountable now behind her. She had taken control of her life, and the future beckoned with promises of adventure and fulfillment. As she lay in bed that night, Patricia felt a strange mixture of emotions, excitement for what lay ahead and a lingering sense of loss for what she was leaving behind. But she had made her choice, and there was no turning back. The life she had dreamed of was finally within reach, and Patricia was determined to embrace it with open arms. The weeks following the divorce were a whirlwind for Patricia. With the paperwork finalized and her path seemingly clear, she indulged more openly in her new lifestyle. She frequented upscale boutiques, treated herself to gourmet dinners, and meticulously planned luxurious getaways. Her days were filled with excitement and the thrill of newfound freedom. But beneath the surface of her vibrant new world, whispers of doubt and suspicion began to swirl around her. Patricia noticed Michael had become increasingly distant, his demeanor marked by an introspection that left her feeling uneasy. She brushed it off initially, attributing it to the aftermath of their separation, but a sense of foreboding lingered at the back of her mind. One evening, while dining at a high-end restaurant, Patricia ran into an old friend who casually mentioned seeing Michael around town, asking questions about her sudden change in lifestyle. The remark sent a jolt of anxiety through her, and Patricia realized that Michael might be catching on to the truth. Determined to stay ahead, Patricia ramped up her efforts to secure her fortune, visiting Sandra more frequently to ensure that her plans remained airtight. Sandra, as always, was calm and methodical, assuring Patricia that everything was under control. "People will talk, Patricia, but as long as we stick to the plan, there's nothing to worry about," Sandra said confidently, her reassurance a balm to Patricia's fraying nerves. Yet, as Patricia's confidence grew, so did Michael's suspicions. He began to piece together the fragments of information he had gathered. The whispers about Patricia's extravagant spending, her sudden absences, and the changes in her demeanor. Each piece of the puzzle led him closer to a truth that felt both inevitable and devastating. Driven by a mix of curiosity and hurt, Michael decided to dig deeper. He enlisted the help of a friend who worked in finance, someone who could discreetly uncover the financial trail Patricia was leaving behind. Together, they started to unravel the mystery of her newfound wealth, slowly uncovering the layers of deception that Patricia had so carefully constructed. Patricia, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware of Michael's investigation. She continued to enjoy her new life, believing that she had successfully outmaneuvered any obstacles in her path. The prospect of being caught seemed distant, overshadowed by the allure of the freedom she had worked so hard to attain. But as Michael's investigation progressed, Patricia's carefully crafted world began to show cracks. Rumors reached her ears about Michael's growing suspicions, and she felt a cold dread creeping in, threatening to unravel everything she had fought for. Despite Sandra's reassurances, Patricia knew she had to act fast. Her future depended on keeping Michael in the dark long enough to secure her plans, and the pressure was mounting. The thrill of her double life was now tainted with fear, a reminder that the consequences of her choices were drawing ever closer. As the tension between them mounted, Patricia realized that the game she had been playing was more dangerous than she had anticipated. The villains were closing in, and she had to decide whether to confront them head-on or find a way to escape before everything came crashing down. Patricia's sense of security began to unravel when Michael confronted her one evening. It was a cool, clear night, and she had just returned home from a day of shopping. The bags, filled with designer clothes and luxury items, were a testament to her newfound lifestyle. As she stepped into the house, she found Michael waiting for her, his expression a mixture of hurt and determination. "Patricia, we need to talk," Michael said, his voice steady but tinged with an edge she had never heard before. Patricia felt a chill run down her spine. She set the bags down, her mind racing as she tried to gauge how much he knew. "What's going on, Michael?" she replied, feigning innocence, though her heart pounded in her chest. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, handing it to her without a word. Patricia unfolded it, her eyes scanning the page as her worst fears were confirmed. It was a printout of the lottery ticket numbers, matched perfectly with the ticket she had hidden away. Alongside it was a list of her recent bank transactions, evidence of her secret spending. "You won, didn't you?" Michael said quietly, his voice filled with disbelief. "I don't understand why you didn't tell me, why you felt you had to keep it all to yourself." Caught, Patricia struggled to find the words. She had been so careful, so meticulous, yet here she was, exposed and vulnerable. The future she had dreamed of suddenly felt like it was slipping through her fingers. "I just wanted something for myself," Patricia admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I wanted to be free, to live the life I've always dreamed of without compromise. Michael shook his head. A mixture of anger and sadness etched on his face. We could have done this together, Patricia. We could have built a life we both wanted. But you chose to keep me in the dark, to lie and deceive. As the reality of her actions sank in, Patricia felt the weight of her decisions crashing down upon her. Her mind raced as she searched for a way to salvage her plans, but the damage was done. The trust that had once existed between them was shattered, and Patricia realized she had lost more than just her chance at wealth. She had lost the person who had once been her partner and friend. "I'm sorry, Michael," Patricia said, tears brimming in her eyes. "I didn't mean for it to end like this." Michael looked at her, his expression a mixture of pity and resignation. "Sorry isn't enough, Pat. You've made your choices, and now we have to deal with the consequences." With that, Michael turned and left the room, leaving Patricia alone with her thoughts and the remnants of her carefully constructed life. The enormity of what she had done settled over her like a heavy fog, obscuring the bright future she had so eagerly pursued. In that moment, Patricia knew she had reached the point of no return. Her dreams of luxury and freedom had come at a price, and she was left to face the consequences of her ambition and betrayal. The world she had built was crumbling around her, and there was no way to undo the damage she had caused. Patricia sat alone in her dimly lit living room, the echoes of her confrontation with Michael still ringing in her ears. The walls seemed to close in around her, the air heavy with regret and desperation. Her dreams of freedom and luxury had turned into a nightmare, the consequences of her actions leaving her isolated and alone. She tried to rationalize her decisions, telling herself that she had only wanted a better life. But as the hours passed, the weight of her betrayal became impossible to ignore. The guilt gnawed at her, relentless and unforgiving, as she realized just how far she had strayed from the person she once was. Her mind was a tumultuous sea of emotions: anger at herself for being caught, fear of losing everything she had worked for, and a profound sadness at the loss of the life she had shared with Michael. Despite their differences, he had been her partner, her confidant, and now she had driven him away with her greed and deception. In the silence of the house, Patricia struggled to find a way out of the mess she had created. She needed a plan, a way to reclaim her life and fortune, but every avenue seemed fraught with danger and uncertainty. Her thoughts drifted to Sandra, hoping her lawyer might have a solution, a way to salvage what was left of her dreams. But even as she considered her options, a darker thought crept into her mind, a desperate, dangerous idea born of fear and the instinct to survive at any cost. What if Michael were no longer an obstacle? Without him, the path to her fortune would be clear, untainted by the complications he presented. The thought horrified her, but its allure was undeniable. Patricia shivered at the idea of taking such drastic action, the moral line she had already crossed widening into an abyss. But the more she thought about it, the more she convinced herself that it might be her only way forward. In the depths of her despair, Patricia felt a shift within her, a cold, calculating resolve that terrified and empowered her in equal measure. She knew she was teetering on the brink of something irreversible, but the thought of losing everything she had fought for drove her to consider the unthinkable. The night stretched on, each hour bringing her closer to a decision that would define the rest of her life. Her ambition and fear had led her to this moment, a crossroads where she had to choose between redemption and ruin. As dawn broke, casting a pale light across the room, Patricia knew she had to act. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but the promise of a future unburdened by regret and missed opportunities was too enticing to resist. With her mind made up, Patricia rose from her chair, her resolve hardening with each step. She would find a way to reclaim her life, no matter the cost. The future she had dreamed of was still within reach, and she was determined to seize it, even if it meant embracing the darkness within her. Patricia spent the next few days meticulously preparing, determined to carry out her plan. She knew she had to be careful, methodical, and ensure that Michael suspected nothing until it was too late. It was a dangerous game, but Patricia was playing for the highest stakes, her future. Her plan hinged on creating the perfect opportunity, a weekend getaway that would allow her to orchestrate an accident, Patricia proposed the idea to Michael, suggesting they take some time away to clear their heads and maybe, just maybe, find a way to move forward amicably. Michael, I've been thinking, Patricia said one evening, trying to sound sincere as they shared a quiet dinner. Maybe you should take a break, go somewhere for the weekend, and just have some time to yourself. Michael looked up from his plate, his expression cautious but not entirely opposed. You think a change of scenery might help? He asked, his voice laced with skepticism. Patricia nodded, doing her best to appear earnest. I do. We've been through a lot, and I think we owe it to ourselves to see if there's anything left to salvage. Sometimes being alone with your thoughts can give you clarity. Michael considered her suggestion, the hope of reconciliation briefly flickering in his eyes. All right, maybe some time away could be good, he agreed, a small smile breaking through the tension between them. It might help me clear my head. With Michael on board, Patricia moved quickly to set her plan into motion. She suggested he take their car, offering to handle the preparations to ensure everything was in place. Over the next few days, Patricia covertly tampered with the car's brakes, knowing that one slip-up on a winding road could achieve what she dared not do directly. On the morning of his trip, Patricia felt a mix of anticipation and dread. Her hands trembled slightly as she helped Michael pack his bag, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand. This was the final step, the moment that would determine everything. As she waved him off, she maintained a facade of calm, even as her heart raced with the gravity of what she was about to attempt. As Michael drove away, Patricia felt a strange sense of detachment, watching the car disappear down the street. Her mind was filled with conflicting emotions, fear of what she had done, excitement for the future she had envisioned, and a pang of guilt that she quickly suppressed. The hours passed slowly, each minute dragging by as Patricia waited for news. She imagined the moment, the call that would inform her of the accident, the final piece of her plan falling into place. But as the day wore on without any word, her anxiety grew, a nagging doubt creeping in. Finally, as evening approached, Patricia's phone rang. Her heart leapt into her throat as she answered, expecting to hear confirmation of her plan's success. But instead, it was Michael on the line, his voice calm but tinged with something she couldn't quite place. Patricia, the car broke down, Michael said, his tone measured. The brakes failed, but I managed to pull over safely. I had it towed to a mechanic. Patricia's breath caught in her throat, her mind racing as she tried to process what he was saying. Oh, that's terrible, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Are you okay? I'm fine, Michael replied, his voice taking on a sharper edge. But the mechanic found something strange. The brake lines were cut, Pat. Silence stretched between them, the weight of Michael's words crashing down on Patricia. Her plan had not only failed, but it had also exposed her deception in the most dangerous way possible. Michael, Patricia began, but the words caught in her throat. I don't want to hear it, Patricia, Michael interrupted, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and hurt. I trusted you, but now I know exactly what you're capable of. With that, Michael ended the call, leaving Patricia alone with the crushing reality of her actions. Her dreams of freedom and fortune had driven her to the brink, and now she was left to face the consequences of her ambition and betrayal. The following days were a blur for Patricia, filled with fear and uncertainty. She knew that Michael had discovered her betrayal, and the consequences loomed large in her mind. Her once clear path to freedom now felt like quicksand, threatening to pull her under with every passing moment. Patricia tried to contact Sandra, hoping her lawyer could offer some guidance or a way out of the mess she had created. But Sandra was cautious, warning Patricia that her actions had crossed a line and advising her to prepare for the fallout. You need to think carefully about your next steps, Patricia, Sandra said over the phone, her voice calm but firm. This is serious, and you need to be ready for whatever comes next. Patricia's heart sank at Sandra's words, realizing that her options were dwindling. The dream of an unfettered life had slipped through her fingers, leaving her isolated and vulnerable. Then, one morning, there was a knock at her door. Patricia opened it to find 2 police officers standing on her doorstep, their expressions somber. Her heart plummeted as they informed her that she was under arrest for attempted murder and fraud. The gravity of her actions hit her like a tidal wave, and for the first time, she truly understood the depth of the hole she had dug for herself. The trial was swift and decisive. The evidence against Patricia was overwhelming. The tampered brake lines, her extravagant spending, and the testimony of the mechanic who had discovered the sabotage. Patricia's own desperation and guilt were laid bare for all to see, and the jury reached a verdict quickly. In court, Michael sat quietly, watching as the woman he had once loved faced the consequences of her choices. Despite everything, there was a lingering sadness in his eyes, a reflection of the life they could have had together. When the judge delivered the sentence, Patricia felt a strange sense of relief mixed with despair. She was convicted of attempted murder and fraud, sentenced to several years in prison. The lottery winnings were divided between Michael and a charity organization, a symbolic gesture of restitution for the harm she had caused. As she was led away in handcuffs, Patricia realized that the life she had dreamed of was gone forever. Her ambition had consumed her, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The wealth she had coveted was now a distant memory, replaced by the harsh reality of her actions. As Patricia began her prison sentence, she had ample time to reflect on the choices that had led her to this point. The stark, concrete walls of her cell were a constant reminder of the freedom she had squandered, and the silence was filled with memories of what could have been. In the outside world, Michael slowly began to rebuild his life. The lottery winnings were a bittersweet windfall, a reminder of the betrayal he had suffered, but also a tool for healing and moving forward. He used a portion of the money to pay off debts and secure his future, but the bulk was donated to a charity that supported education for underprivileged children, a cause close to his heart as a teacher. Michael returned to his teaching job with renewed purpose, finding solace in the everyday routine and the impact he could have on his students' lives. He realized that, despite the chaos and pain Patricia's actions had caused, there was a silver lining, a deeper appreciation for integrity and the things that truly mattered. As he stood in front of his classroom, guiding students through complex equations and encouraging them to think critically, Michael felt a sense of fulfillment that no amount of money could buy. He had discovered a new perspective, one that valued honesty, compassion, and the simple joys of life. Meanwhile, Patricia struggled to come to terms with her new reality. In the solitude of her cell, she confronted the person she had become, a woman consumed by greed and ambition, willing to sacrifice everything for a fleeting dream. It was a painful reckoning, but also an opportunity for growth and redemption. During her time in prison, Patricia participated in therapy sessions and educational programs, slowly rediscovering the values she had lost sight of in her quest for wealth. She found a semblance of peace in the routines and began to make amends, both to herself and those she had wronged. A few years passed, and life moved on. The morning light filtered gently through the windows of Michael's classroom, casting a warm glow on the desks arranged in neat rows. The sounds of laughter and chatter filled the air as students filed into the room, their youthful energy invigorating and contagious. Michael stood at the front of the class, a calm smile on his face as he watched his students settle into their seats. The hustle and bustle of the school felt like a second home to him now, a place where he could channel his experiences into lessons that went beyond textbooks. "All right, everyone," Michael said, his voice steady and reassuring. "Today, we're going to talk about solving complex problems, but not just in math. I want you to think about the challenges you face in life and how you can approach them." The students listened intently, their eyes bright with curiosity and the promise of the future. Michael felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that he was helping shape their minds and encouraging them to pursue their dreams with integrity. Outside the window, the sun was rising higher, bathing the city of Detroit in a golden hue. It was a new day, a new beginning, filled with possibilities and hope. Michael took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past lift as he embraced the present. Though Patricia's actions had tested him in ways he never imagined, he had emerged stronger, with a clearer understanding of what truly mattered. The betrayal and heartache had given way to resilience and a renewed commitment to living a life guided by honesty and compassion. As he finished his lesson, Michael glanced out at his students, a smile tugging at his lips. Despite everything, he felt grateful for the journey, for the lessons learned, and for the chance to start anew. In that moment, Michael knew he was ready to move forward, leaving the shadows of the past behind. He had found peace in the simple act of teaching and the knowledge that true wealth lay not in material possessions, but in the connections and impact he made on those around him. With the bell ringing in the background, signaling the end of class, Michael stepped into the corridor, ready to face whatever the day had in store. The future was bright, and he was determined to make the most of it, one day at a time.